be exploring the preparation of fish en papillot, a great Cajun dish. It consists of a fish fillet that in Louisiana is typically pompano, but pompano is hard to find elsewhere. But plenty of other fish will do. Any white-fleshed, tender fish will do, and tonight I'm using red snapper, fresh. So why not buy a fish fillet? Already prepared for you, ready to go from most grocery stores. It's one reason. Freshness. You don't know how fresh that fillet is. When you buy whole fish like this, you know how fresh it is. All you have to look is at the eyes of that fish. The gills are gone, and the gills should be bright red. But unscrupulous fish shops can color the gills red, but there's nothing they can do about the eye. The eye has to be bulging forward and must be bright. And if you look at this eye, it wasn't like it was caught today, but it's fresh. It doesn't quite bulge as much as I would like it to be, and it's not quite as crystal clear as I would like it to be. There's a little bit, there's a hint of cloudiness in the eye. It's a little more apparent in this eye. We are now ready for the exciting part of this adventure. That's the assembly. I want to tell you about a little trick I learned from a French chef from Wilmington, North Carolina. We were having dinner in a restaurant one evening, and she sat at our table at the end of the evening, and we started talking about what else? Cooking. And she said she attended a conference where she learned a neat little trick when it comes down to cleaning lobster tails. You know, separating the meat from the hard, bony part of the lobster can be a little tricky. The meat sticks very hard to the shell, and it's difficult to separate the two. So what she learned was that if you make a solution of vinegar and water, she wasn't exactly sure on what the ratio was, but for my purpose, I used 2 tablespoons white vinegar to about a cup of water. Place a small lobster tail in that solution, and I place my lobster tail in a microwave. I like using a microwave for cooking seafood. Now my microwave features a temperature probe. Yours may or may not, but it didn't take that long. What I wanted to do was simply bring up the temperature of the lobster to about 80 degrees, not quite cooked. And I used about 80% power on my microwave, and that took about 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, the temperature came up to about 80 degrees. And then, miracle of miracles, I was able to separate the meat, the lobster meat, from the shell totally intact without having any membrane attached to the meat or having any of the lobster meat torn in the process. Neat little trick. As you can tell, the lobster is still uncooked. The recipe calls for chopped lobster, so I'm going to chop it into chunks, just like this. And I'm going to add the chopped lobster to a mixture of chopped fresh shrimp. Now you can use a variety of seafoods in this dish. You can use oysters, you can use clams, you can use crawfish if you have it. The idea is to have a tasty little blend of 2, 3, 4, or 5 different types of seafood. And that will form part of the sauce that will place on top of the fish fillet. Now, the next item of interest is this piece of parchment paper. Now, parchment paper didn't used to be easily available, but now it is widely available in just about all grocery stores. So why cut it in the shape of a heart? It's not even Valentine's Day. Well, the easiest way to cut it into the shape of a heart is to start with a square piece of paper, draw the heart on it, fold it in half, and then with your scissors, follow the pattern of the heart. And why it has to be a heart will become apparent very, very shortly. So the first step is to open it, and then is to make a little retaining edge all along the edge, like this, so that it stands up. It's kind of a retaining wall kind of thing. And I'll be greasing the parchment with oil spray. The recipe calls for using butter, but this is so much easier. And this will keep the fish from sticking to the paper. Now here's my sauce. It's quite cold and thick, as you can see. And I'm going to put half the sauce in the bottom, place the fish fillets on top, place the seafood on top of the fish fillet, and then top the whole thing off with the sauce. Sounds wonderful. Well, believe me, it is. Kind of spread the sauce around a little bit. It's a hard, thick sauce now that it's been cooled. Now, because seafood and fish uses liquid during the cooking process, I added about 2 teaspoons of unflavored breadcrumbs so that any fluid will be absorbed not only by the thick white sauce, but also by the breadcrumbs I've added. Well, the next step calls for adding the fish fillet. Here's a beautiful one, placed right on top of the sauce. Then the whole thing, well, you may want to add a little salt and pepper on top of the fish fillet. Little pepper. Seeing can be a little on the heated side. Little salt. Now, fish is rather bland, so you can take a little bit of salt. That's enough. I use non-iodized salt. Now I'm going to top the whole thing off with the mixed seafood. Can you have too much seafood? Well, yes and no. You don't want to burst the paper. Seal the package so that the seafood mixture bakes in the parchment and the sauce won't leak. And the way that's done, by folding it over like this, and then folding the paper over tightly. It'll be baking in this position. Now, the beauty of this dish is that you can prepare this super fancy dish hours in advance and then impress the heck out of your friends by simply placing it in a microwave just a few minutes before dinner, and it'll be done in less than 10 minutes. See you then. Well, we've arrived at the most exciting moment of the evening, the opening of the filet en papillot. And as you open the bag, I've cooked the en papillot to an internal temperature 145 degrees. Fish is cooked perfectly at 145. And as I open the bag, there's this wonderful aroma of brandy, wine, cream, butter, green onions, garlic, and seafood. The next step is just to scoop it out and put it on the plate. First, it's easier to cut it in half and simply scoop it out, place it. Isn't this gorgeous?